Are we on, Sheila? Jackie? Are we on?
I believe so. I'm trying to find the thing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission on January 11th, 2010. Happy New Year, everyone. Jackie, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Jemian? Commissioner Armenian? Commissioner Chan? Commissioner Miller?
Present.
Commissioner Yao?
Present. Next item, please.
Under consent items, consider minutes of the November 2nd, 2009 meeting. Move to approve.
Do you have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Okay, Commissioner.
Roll call, please. Go ahead, roll call for approval of the minutes.
Right. Yeah, Commissioner Jemian? Aye. Commissioner Armenian?
Aye.
Commissioner Chan? Aye. Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Yao?
Aye. Thank you. Next item, please.
Okay, the next item is item number 3, action item, introduction of new commissioners and election of new officers. Motion to approve newly appointed GWP Commission Chair and Commission Secretary.
So I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome the new commissioners and give each of them an opportunity to tell us about themselves. Who would like to start?
Hi, my name is Armin Ajamian. I am a resident of the lovely city of Glendale. I've lived here now since, I believe, 2007. First of all, thank you for having me on as a part of this wonderful board. Looking to do my best and to use my best abilities to help in making the most appropriate decisions for the city and the GWP. My brief background. Grew up in LA, went to school at our local school at USC here. We just lost our coach today, so it's a sad day, but besides that, I did my undergrad and graduate school at USC, after which I went to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers in their auditing division. Was mainly in charge of auditing of financial institutions, hedge funds, VC firms, and so on. I left public accounting and started my own tax and consulting practice here in Glendale, where which I believe kept for about 4 years, and quickly got out of the tax business, which was a little bit boring, and sold that practice in 2008. I started mainly focusing on consulting. I was consulting with numerous VC and angel groups out of LA and Orange County, and I got a little bit into the alternative energy world, and got to travel to the Nordic countries and saw a lot of new technologies. As it relates to green energy, I think the Scandinavian countries are it's the largest innovation hub for all of alternative energy. So, got to learn a little bit about the financing component of alternative energy, and saw how a huge issue it is here in the United States. There are a lot of projects on the table, but a lot of them are taking a very long time to put together, and then finance component is lacking. So I guess that's pretty much it. Working on a few projects here locally with certain partners on the energy side.
Thank you so much.
That's it.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Zanku Armenian. I am currently employed with Southern California Edison in their corporate communications department. It's a pleasure to join this group and make a contribution to the community and making sure we represent the interests of the community on the many, many important issues in the water and power industry today. Within Southern California Edison, I'm very active supporting communications for many of their major lines of business, everything from their customer service to their transmission and distribution. I'm very active, and I lead the communications effort for public outreach for their smart metering program that just started deployment a few months ago, currently at about 150,000 meters installed for a total of about 5 million meters that will be installed over the next couple of years. So I'm very active on the issues there that are percolating within the smart meter industry. I also support their power procurement operations. I'm very familiar with the renewable energy area. I support their ethics and compliance area, so very familiar with ethics issues in the industry and in the company specifically. I look forward to contributing all my knowledge and experience that I've gained from working with the executive leadership of Southern California Edison. I've already had the privilege of meeting the management team at GWP. I proactively reached out and already made an initial acquaintance. I'm sure we're going to meet a lot more on the many different issues coming before us. So I look forward to making my contributions and kind of bringing my knowledge and the experience that I'm gaining at Southern California Edison, and hopefully that can also inform some of our decisions and on a more local level. I'm very active in the Glendale community, as well as on state and national politics. I got my start in my career in Washington, D.C., so I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill and working the congressional circuit before moving out to the West Coast via San Francisco, then ultimately down here. Me and my wife live in Glendale, and my wife has lived here her whole life. I've lived here since 2003. But very active throughout the community, and I'm very interested and looking forward to representing the community on all the very important and long-term decisions that are made as part of this commission and the City Council. Thank you.
Well, I just want to welcome the two new commissioners, and your background, as we understand it, will bring a lot of importance to this commission, as well as help GWP and its staff to do its job better. So I want to congratulate you to being appointed to this commission, and look forward to working with two of you.
Thank you.
And next item is to have a motion to elect new officers. I mean, as you are aware, I'm filling in since last year as President Pro Tem, and so we'd like to have new elections for President and Secretary. Do you have any nominations?
I would like to nominate for the presidency Mr. Hugh Yao.
I accept. Thank you.
I second.
And I would like to nominate for Secretary Commissioner Terry Chan.
I'll second that nomination.
I accept. Thanks.
And we'd like to just have a quick vote on these two appointments.
Commissioner Ajemian.
Aye.
I'm sorry? Oh, yes, we. Commissioner Armenian.
Aye.
Commissioner Chan.
Excuse me. Before we take the vote, I believe there's a speaker that wanted to speak, so
We need to do
recommend
that
that we hold
first.
off and allow the speaker to speak.
Okay.
Okay.
In which case, I'd like to invite Mr. Herbert Milano.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair Yao, Commissioners. My name is Herbert Milano. I want to take briefly the moment to thank you for allowing me to speak at this rather inconvenient time, but right before your vote. But I wanted to welcome the two new commissioners, and I think that just looking at the background and knowing about all of you, this is probably one of the most exemplary commissioners group that I've seen in the city of Glendale in a very long time. Very capable and tremendous amount of professionalism behind your backgrounds. And I think this bodes incredibly well for the city of Glendale. The reason why I wanted to talk to you precisely about the issue of the selection of the board president or chair is that we've been in a water crisis for the last couple of years, since 2007 when the water crisis was declared. And from time to time, I find that some of the commission meetings are canceled, like it was canceled in the month of December. The issues that you have are generally quite complex sometimes, and the meetings take a very long time. It is almost to the extent that the Commission almost needs to meet twice a month. But that means that the availability of the chair has to be very clear, that no meetings will be canceled, especially because the chair sets the agenda and ensures that everyone will be present in case there are special meetings to be held. So it is my hope that if Commissioner Chair Yao decides to take this position, that there are no meetings canceled, because it's been one of my major concerns about many of the other commissions as well, where I find continual cancellations of meetings, especially when there is an issue with the public that has been publicized, like it happened back in, I think, in March or April. So I want to make sure that if whoever is going to lead this group and this board, that there be an absolute commitment to make sure that no meetings are canceled, because the public needs to be present to voice their concerns about the water crisis, the energy, and the costs that are of significant issue to the residents and the stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Milano.
If there are no further speaker cards and if there are no further nominations, then we can proceed with the election of officers.
Okay. So shall we just do the vote
Let's
again?
have a motion.
The motion.
We have a motion to continue the nomination process.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, to terminate the election process?
Nomination. Turn this on. Terminate the nomination process and proceed with the elections for those nominated. I'm not hearing anyone nominate anyone else.
Okay.
Okay. There's no need for a motion on that. If there are no further nominations, we can go ahead and close the nominations and then proceed with the motion and the election. So is there a motion to accept the ballot as offered?
I'll make that that motion. Thank
Do I have
you.
a second?
I second.
Should we have roll call for the votes?
Commissioner Ajamian?
Aye.
Commissioner Armenian?
Aye.
Commissioner Chan?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Yao?
Aye. And thank you. And I just want to thank Mr. Milano for bringing up that comment, because I think it's a crucial process they want to go through before any meetings are canceled. So we'll be discussing that with GWP staff to make sure that, we have a process in place so that when meetings do get canceled, we have commissioners, at least the majority, on board with that, and especially when the public is interested in coming to our commission meeting. Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item under reports and information, we have General Manager topic, Shoal Canyon. Mr. Glenn Steiger.
First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone back, wish you all a Happy New Year, welcome our two new commissioners, and look forward to working with this. And I concur with Mr. Milano. I think we have a extraordinary commission, and again, we look forward to working together. A couple of announcements, and I'd like to then just speak for a minute on the Shoal Canyon issue. First, we are celebrating GWP's 100th birthday, and on Saturday, January 30th, we will have a community expo, a birthday celebration here in the plaza from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. We'll have expositions, we'll have refreshments, demonstrations, a number of different things. So I urge you all to attend if you possibly can, and certainly urge the public to attend too. We're very, very proud of the fact that we're 100 years old. Most of the staff doesn't look it either, so I probably do. But also wanted to formally invite all of you to the graduation, the first graduation of the Verdugo Power Academy, which is this Friday, January 15th, at 1 o'clock at the Glendale Central Library. I'll hold my my comments. I think there'll be a few comments later on about that. But again, we're very, very proud to have our first graduating class. And now, finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about an issue which we recently concluded very favorably, and that was the negotiation of the Shoal Canyon landfill gas, the buyout of that contract. GWP has had a contract for the purchase of landfill gas from the Shoal Canyon since the early 90s with a private firm. The contract originally was put together to effect a slight discount in the purchase of landfill gas over what it would normally cost to buy natural gas. Over the years, due to a flaw in the formula and vagaries in the natural gas market, we actually ended up in a reversal of that, where we were paying about 1.8 times the natural gas index for that same gas. The landfill gas is very, very beneficial to GWP in that it provides renewable energy for us, which is very, very important. Over the last 6 months or so, we have engaged in negotiations to buy out the contract. And what that means is we would buy the contract through its termination in 2014. We would own the gas at that point in the landfill, and we would own the facilities that extract the gas. It took a significant, as you might imagine, amount of negotiating to close this by the end of 2009, which was one of the requirements to do that. Yet we did, and it was very, very close, and I commend all the parties, particularly the GWP staff that did that. But we did close the deal. We now own the contract and the facility. We will see an immediate, over the course of the contract, reduction, savings of $9 million with the potential of more savings, and also complete control of the gas in the landfill. It's very, very beneficial to GWP. It locks the price in. It has, among other things, it has contributed to our ability to lower rates as of the first of the year by 9%. And that's not fuel adjustment, that's the full GWP electric rate. So as of the first of the year, our rates will be, or have been, reduced by 9%. So I'm very, very pleased to announce, and again, I thank the GWP staff, and I thank all involved in doing that.
Any comments?
I would like to first congratulate Director Steiger and the staff of GWP for negotiating this difficult conclusion to the contract. And I just want to clarify, I understand that the full amount is actually being returned to ratepayers through this rate reduction. Is that correct? And I'd like to point out that, in my experience, that's a very unusual move, which I think shows loyalty to the people who support this organization through the rates. And again, I commend Director Steiger and the staff of GWP for doing this. I did have one question, sir, and that is on the contract and the facilities. How exactly will that be managed now that GWP owns those?
What we have done is negotiated a transition period with the former owner, because there have been employees that were operating that plant. Those employees stay on for the next 6 months. We have paid for them to stay on, yet they still are under the management of the old contractor, because they obviously knew how to operate the landfill. By or before the end of that 6 month period, we will have transitioned those two employees to a permanent position, either overseen or within GWP.
And just one final comment. I'd like to point out this fulfills an important task that was part of the strategic plan. Is that correct?
It is part of the strategic plan. In fact, it was a very important part. It was part of our commitment to reduce rates approximately 35% below Edison within 5 years.
It's an admirable goal.
It is an admirable goal, and we know it's a difficult one, but this is a large step towards getting there, yes.
Thank you so much.
I have a question. First of all, congratulations. This is great news. With the renewable portfolio standard, I know we've already passed the 20% mark.
Yes.
And by doing this, what percentage are we increasing?
No, because we were purchasers of the gas in the past, so it just transfers ownership. So that doesn't change.
I see.
But we are still well above 20% as of today, which is well ahead of our goal. So The landfill gas is about 6% of that 21%.
6% of that 20?
Yeah,
Which
6
you already-
percentage points, yes.
Which you had it in the portfolio to begin with?
Yes, it's
Okay.
already been included.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Quick question. How many employees are coming over, and how much increase in payroll as a result?
Well, right now there are 2 employees of the existing corporation that run that plant. So whether or not we bring 1 or 2 over remains to be seen.
I have another question regarding that relates to the risk management and the procurement of such gas. Since we now own the facilities, is there an opportunity to maybe resell that gas to someone else who might utilize that at a higher price?
It is possible, and of course we'll look at all options. We haven't gotten to that point yet where we've really explored that option, but it is a possibility. Yes.
Great.
One question. Have you guys looked at all this? From what I understand, this was put in place some time ago. Have you looked at the efficiency of the technology that was put in place and to see what modifications could be done to it to possibly improve the efficiency?
Yes, in fact, that's one of the things we're looking at right now. We're looking at the potential of landfill gas has a lower BTU content than normal natural gas, so it's not as efficient. And one of the options that we are looking at now that we have control of it is the potential of bringing the landfill gas up to the same BTU content and the same quality as natural gas, which would give us a lot more flexibility. So yes, we are looking at that.
Any other questions or comments?
After the 6-month period, what's the vision for managing the assets at that point?
Well, GWP will be completely responsible for the management of it. We'll determine within that 6-month period how we do it, whether we
right.
contract it out, but that will be our complete responsibility. Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Steiger.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Number 4B from our legal explanation.
I'm sorry.
We have
Did
one
we not
more.
have a
I'm
speaker
sorry.
card for this item?
I'm sorry. It's been a new year. Sorry, Mr. Milano. Just a late call coming in from Mr. Milano to speak for this item in 4A1. Mr. Milano?
Thank you very much. Chair Yao, Commissioners, Mr. Steiger. My name is Herbert Molano. I have 3 questions that I hope Mr. Steiger could answer, and I have an observation. First of all, the observation. I think that the steps that are being taken by the City of Glendale and the Department of Water and Power to do everything possible to lower the cost of the utility and the electrical charges that are being imposed on residents and commercial is very commendable. A recent study that I done with the City of LA, Pasadena, and Burbank show that their rates, the reservation rates, hover around 10 cents to 12 cents per kilowatt hour. Ours are hovering around over 16 to 18 cents per kilowatt hour if you take the global total yearly average. So we're easily 50% above the rest of the other cities, according to the data that I have. Now, I would like to have the following questions: is what steps will be then taken in the short term to lower the cost, especially because on the last publication sent out by GWP, that we had 23,000 customers asking for some kind of relief and postponement of their bill. The second question I have is, where did the $9 million come from in order to pay the purchase, to basically purchase out this contract? And the third question is the following. I have a copy here of the landfill gas and facilities lease, and this was signed on the 7th of April of 1992, and it is a 20-year contract. And the Glendale News Press shows that the contract is all the way to 2014. So there is some discrepancy here between what I have here with regard to the document and what the Glendale News Press reported. And I was wondering if the $9 million basically is to cover the contract for all of these years up to 2014 or only up to 2012. So anyway, those are my questions, and that's my observation. Thank you.
Mrs. Steiger would like to respond?
Yeah. The contract does go to 2014. Maybe, Steve, you can answer why the discrepancy.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, Steve Lenz, the Assistant General Manager of Supply. Just real quickly, the execution date of that contract was 1992, but the effective date was the first date that we took gas. That was in 1994. So it's the 94 plus the 20 for the 2014.
Okay. Thank you. To the question as to where the funds came from to purchase it, that came out of GWP reserves. We may or may not opt to finance that. We don't have to. We had a significant amount in reserves, so we can cover that and still be within our accepted standard of reserves. So currently it's out of our reserves. And finally, to your question about rates, GWP's rates are not 50% higher than Burbank and Pasadena. In fact, not even close. Our own analysis shows that we run pretty close, and as a matter of fact, overall to our blended rate. And of course, there are many different rate classifications, and depending upon how much usage per month and so on. But if you take the blended rate, which is really the only way you can make an effective comparison, we are a little bit above Pasadena, and a little bit, I don't know, I can't give you the number, but it's nowhere near 50%. And at times, Burbank and ourselves are close. We can be even in some cases. We overall, blended rate-wise, are again, and I'm not going to give you a number because I don't have the number, but it's a very insignificant amount above Burbank. There's no question that Southern California's utilities generally are at the high end of the state. There's no argument. We've had this discussion before. Freely admit that our rates are at the higher end, and we're making every attempt to lower rates. We've just lowered rates again. I'll repeat, 9%. That's significant as of the first of this year, and we will continue as we are committed to do everything we can to lower rates, stabilize, and maintain that differential. But we can, in fact, I would suggest that at our next meeting we come back with the actual comparison so that you can see where we stand versus Burbank, Pasadena, and Los Angeles, LA. Do that.
And obviously Edison, right? Southern California Edison.
And Edison, of course. How could we forget?
That's our benchmark.
That's our benchmark. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Steiger.
Yes.
And next item, please.
Item 4B from our legal counsel, explanation of GWP Commission advisory role.
Good afternoon, Mr. President and members of the Commission. My name is Christine Godinez. I am Senior Assistant City Attorney for the City Attorney's Office representing Glendale Water and Power. And I'd like to start by congratulating and welcoming our new commissioners and welcoming back our returning commissioners. It's my pleasure to work with you. I look forward to working with our new commissioners and continuing to serve as your legal advisor. Today, I wanted to give you a brief overview of some procedural issues just to give our new commissioners and also our returning commissioners a good broad understanding of what the role of the Glendale Water and Power Commission is. So I'd like to start by talking about three topics. The first would be just a general procedural overview. Next, I'd like to talk about implied versus express powers of the Commission. And then finally, a subset of that issue would be a discussion of the transfer from the GWP surplus fund. Just first, what I will not be covering in this presentation is the AB 1234 training. That's the every 2 years training regarding ethics and Brown Act and open government. That training is actually going to be coming up in the next few weeks. We're still finalizing the date, but it looks like it's going to be in early February. So be looking for an announcement from Glendale Water and Power advising you of the dates of those trainings. As I said, it's required every 2 years, so it's my understanding that each of the commissioners is now up for that training, so you'll be contacted about that in the near term. Okay, so to provide a general procedural overview of what your role is, if you look in the Glendale Municipal Code, Chapter 2.72 sets forth all of your powers and duties, so that's really what guides you as far as what your governing authority is. Just very generally, there are 5 commissioners, as you know, all of whom must be qualified electors at appointment and during incumbency, which essentially means you must reside in Glendale. There are 4-year terms of office, which are coterminous with the council member that appointed you. Each commissioner that was appointed in October or November of this past year may serve a total of 2 terms after their current term expires. Next slide. Meetings are held monthly. Special meetings may be called by the president or by any 3 members of the commission. And it is the president's duty to preside over all of the meetings. If the president should be absent for any meeting, then the other members may elect a president pro tem who would serve at that meeting. The secretary's duty is to keep a record of all the proceedings and to transmit recommendations to council, as well as just ordinary duties of a secretary of a body. A quorum is 3 members of the commission. If there are fewer than 3 members present, those members may adjourn from time to time to a day certain. But otherwise, the members could not transact business if there was not a quorum present. Attendance rules. It's important not to miss 3 consecutive meetings or more than 75% of the meetings within a 12-month period, which 12 months runs from the time of your appointment. If you do miss more meetings than that, then you are potentially subject to removal from service on the GWP Commission. Finally, placing matters on the agenda. Matters would be agendized. Typically, the discussion occurs under new business on the agenda. It's always a standing item on the agenda. And the recommended practice is that 2 members of the commission would support any recommendation to put an item on the agenda. There's no need for a formal motion, but one commissioner, if they wanted to hear a particular item, would announce it, and then it would require at least a second commissioner to be in support of hearing that item on the agenda. That's the practice followed by the City Council, and that's the recommended practice for this commission.
Does that have to be done within a commission meeting, or can that be done outside of a meeting where emails are exchanged so that you can be more timely on issues?
It should be really done in the commission meeting, and the reason for that is Brown Act issues. We don't want to run into a situation where there are discussions going on outside of the meeting. So that's why we put it as a standing item.
So if there's an issue, let's say I brought up an issue today, it wouldn't be able to be dealt with until the following commission meeting or a special meeting if it's called by enough commissioners.
Right, because otherwise it hasn't been agendized, so it would be a Brown Act violation as well. Okay. Moving on to implied versus express powers of the commission. There are obviously express powers which are set forth in that Chapter 2.72, which I discussed. In addition, the GWP Commission has implied powers. Now, what does implied powers mean? Well, there's a broad, somewhat ambiguous legal definition, as always, which is that city boards and commissions also have implied powers which are necessarily incident to those expressly granted. Now, that's a subject of some interpretation, but it has to flow from those express powers. So what are your express powers? Firstly, you have the power to investigate the operations and facilities of the Glendale Water and Power Department and the need for changes or additions in its plant or in its operation, and to make recommendations to the city manager and the council accordingly. So, for example, recently, the commission recommended that a water conservation ordinance be adopted by council. And so the recommendation is always to the city council, recommending that a particular action be taken. Today I heard questions regarding the efficiency of the Shoal Canyon natural gas facility. That's in the nature of a question about the operations and the facilities that would be within your purview. Secondly, you have the authority to recommend to the city manager and the council ways and means of financing changes and additions to the plant or the methods of operation of the Glendale Water and Power Commission. So, for example, something like an expansion of the power plant. You would be authorized to discuss how would that be funded. Would it be a bond measure? Would there be a fee increase? How would GWP go about funding that change? Thirdly, you have the power to recommend to the city manager changes of administrative policy which the commission deems desirable in order that the Glendale Water and Power Commission Department may better serve the people of the city. So within the past 6 months, this commission adopted appeals procedures which would apply in the case of appeals for example, appeals of specified penalties, like a penalty for meter tampering. So that would be in the nature of an administrative policy that is within your purview to adopt. Next, the powers and duties of the Glendale Water and Power Commission are of an advisory nature only, and do not include the power of directing the conduct of the Glendale Water and Power Commission division. So what does that mean? That means, for example, issues of related to particular contracts, or issues related to how the city has conducted a bidding process or an RFP for a particular matter, or the hiring and firing of Glendale Water and Power staff, or the hiring and firing of a consultant or a contractor would be outside the scope of what you have the authority to do, because that is within the direction and of the conduct of the Glendale Water and Power Division. Generally, as a general rule, your authority is prospective in nature. If you notice, a lot of these items deal with changes or additions. It's, as a general rule, it's big picture stuff. It's not, a particular customer's bill, and unless it has to do with an appeal, which is within your authority. Which leads me to the next item, the appeals board. Finally, your authority is to serve as the appeals board for appeals regarding various matters. These would be delinquent master metered accounts, meter tampering, theft of energy or water, or failures to install or to test backflow prevention devices. So there are procedures in the Glendale Municipal Code where failure to comply with these provisions calls for a penalty, and if that penalty is appealed, you would serve as the appellate body. As I mentioned, about 6 months ago, the Commission approved some appeals procedures. I won't go into those in detail today, but those are attached for your review, and if you have any questions about them, I'd be happy to discuss those further with you. So moving on to my third topic, the transfer from the Glendale Water and Power Surplus Fund. This is an item which is frequently a hot topic, so we thought it was worthwhile to discuss with you today. The transfer is required by the Glendale Charter, and I've printed the provision there for your review. I'll just read it to you. At the end of each fiscal year, an amount equal to 25% of the operating revenues of Glendale Water and Power for each year, excluding other cities or utilities at wholesale rates, shall be transferred from said GWP surplus fund to the General Reserve Fund, provided that the Council may annually, at or before the time for adopting the general budget for the ensuing fiscal year, reduce said amount or wholly waive such transfer if, in its opinion, such reduction or waiver is necessary to ensure the sound financial position of said department. So the takeaway message from this is that it's a mandatory transfer per the Charter, and that the authority, even of Council itself, to amend that transfer is very limited. You see that the Council may annually reduce said amount or wholly waive if, in its opinion, it makes the finding that such reduction or waiver is necessary to ensure the sound financial position of the Glendale Water and Power Department. So that's within the authority of the City Council. Next is some history on this charter provision. This was enacted back in 1930. The voters voted to provide GWP surplus fund only for use by GWP at that time, which is interesting. And then 11 years later, in 1941, the voters first approved that 12% transfer to the general fund. And then in 1949, the voters increased that transfer to 25%, where it has stood since that time in the Glendale Charter. The transfer can be subject to debate by this Commission, and it's a topic that has come up in the past. However, it is up to Council to reduce or waive, as I said before, and only if they make that finding that it's in the sound financial position of GWP. So that's really within Council's authority. Changing the Charter is something that the Council itself cannot do. This would have to be done by a vote of the citizens of Glendale. And that could be done by initiative or by placing the matter on the ballot. So it would not be something that is within the purview of the GWP Commission to change, although it can be discussed, as mentioned. So that concludes my brief overview. I'm happy to entertain any questions if there are any at this time.
Thank you for this excellent introduction of the role of the Commission. I would like to suggest for the other commissioners present that maybe we consider asking for this kind of training to be conducted periodically, and especially if new members come on. I know that when I first started, I would have benefited a great deal by having some kind of presentation like this. And if the other commissioners are agreeable, perhaps we could have a motion to that effect. But I'd like to open it up to debate.
You mean you didn't watch the DVDs from a few years ago to be up to speed?
I started before then.
I mean, I think it's well worth it. I agree with you that as long as when you have new members on board, I think it's very worthwhile to repeat this type of training for the existing members as well. And thank you for an excellent presentation.
Thank you. I'd be happy to provide further trainings, and if there's an interest by more than one commissioner, then we can certainly agendize it for a future agenda.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions just so I can educate myself a little bit more since I'm new. One has to do with what you mentioned about the bidding processes, hiring, firing of contractors, etc. We are, at least from my very current experience, those proposals are shared in electronic form with the commissioners. But if I heard you correctly, this commission does not have authority to look into those matters. So why are they being sent? What's the purpose?
I guess I'm not familiar with what's being sent. Is it an agenda item?
Yeah,
that's
every
being sent?
proposal that's been made to City Council that's going to go before a City Council vote, such as a contract, for, let's say, hundreds of thousands of dollars on something. So that proposal that's going to go before a City Council agenda is shared with us, I guess, now from what I understand, if I'm understanding correctly, as an FYI, but this commission does not really have any authority or opportunity to ask questions about that before it goes before City Council. Is that correct?
Well, I believe that they are provided as a matter of information. However, if there's an item that's of interest to two or more commissioners, then it certainly can be agendized for discussion. But as far as directing the hiring of particular staff members or consultants, that would be outside the purview.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
what
But we can have discussions about it as long as it's agendized
Certainly.
with two or more. Okay.
Certainly.
My second question has to do with you've covered the ground rules as a commission, but I'd be interested in terms of ground rules as a individual commissioner. What is our purview? For example, I'm interested in spending the time to get to know GWP's operations more closely so that I can be a more informed commissioner. Is that okay for me to individually reach out to GWP, have meetings with them as they see appropriate, do a ride-along with the troublemen? I don't know. There could be many different types of activities to educate myself better as a commissioner so that I can be more effective in my role. Is that appropriate?
I think that's absolutely appropriate, and it's commendable that you would take an interest in the operations of GWP, and that's something that should be scheduled with Glenn Steiger. We request actually that the commissioners deal with Mr. Steiger directly as opposed to approaching staff individually, just because it allows us the opportunity to coordinate and make sure that we don't, for example, run into a Brown Act violation or a problem. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I'd like to this time invite Herman Milano for this item to speak on 4B1. Mr. Milano?
Commissioner, President Yao, commissioners, and Mr. Steiger, my name is Herbert Milano. I'd like to question the advice being given to you by the City Attorney's Office with regard to the requirement by the Brown Act on the two or more commissioners. I've read the Brown Act in the past several times. This is an issue that originally came out with the Glendale City Council, where, generally speaking, the chair or the mayor of a board is the only one who really has the authority to set the agenda. And apparently some of the council members did not have their views considered and agendized. So as a consequence of that, it was an internal procedure that was created, not something that came from the state of California. When it comes to the agenda, only a 72-hour notification is required by the Brown Act. I don't think this is required at all. Because if, as you mentioned, Commissioner Armenian, if something happens between now and the next commission meeting in the middle of the month that is pertinent and significant, you want to talk to the chair and basically agendize that for an item, and so long as it's 72 hours before, that's all that you need to comply with regard to the Brown Act. And that's my interpretation, but we have the city attorney here who could probably clarify that a little bit more. Second thing, with regard to Article 11, Section 22, which is what you are dealing with regard to the operating revenues. Don't forget that it's not 25% of the overall revenues. It's 25% of the self-generating part of the utility. Many people confuse that. The second thing about it is that this section is in two parts. The first section defines, I'm sorry, the term is not reserves. They have another term for the amount that the utility, electrical utility and water utility should set aside. And so if during the year you're setting aside a certain amount, even though on the second part you can actually authorize up to 25 of that percentage, if that stuff is not in the reserves, you can't give it away. It still does not stop you from making a recommendation to the City Council that this amount be less than that. It has been a contentious issue in the past, and a few years ago, two of the commissioners resigned with regard to their recommendation to the City Council that was basically ignored. So it's a delicate issue, but I strongly suggest that you truly read those two parts, those two sections carefully, and really identify what this particular part of the charter really is meant to do. And I would also suggest that you look and think back as to the reasons why that part of the charter provision was there. Why it authorizes that movement basically into the general fund. The things have changed significantly in the last few years with regard to how those funds are used and what it is doing today, that I think that in many court cases has been disallowed, especially one lawsuit that came out in 2007 in which the Los Angeles Unified School District, but being supported by the State Attorney General, basically took the Los Angeles Water and Power to court, and the court held in favor of the State Attorney General and the Los Angeles Unified Schools, and the Water and Power had to refund the electrical fees in excess of cost, going back to the 1996 Proposition 218 when it took effect the following year. So basically they had to refund $95 million going back to that date. So there's some precedence here in law, in state law, having to do with the way these funds should be applied, especially to certain entities. I strongly suggest that you basically read up on those cases of law and also reread the charter amendment with what is really authorized. It's a significant issue in Glendale with regard to the way the city spends its funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Comment from council?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to the comments by Mr. Milano. First, with regard to the Brown Act, I don't believe I stated that the Brown Act is what sets forth the procedure for agendizing items. The requirement or the suggestion that you have two commissioners put an item on the agenda. I think what I was referring to was a question about whether there could be discussion and debate amongst commissioners outside the meeting regarding whether or not an item could be placed on the agenda. Secondly, with regard to the transfer, I believe it's accurately represented in what I've just presented to you, that it is the mandatory requirement of the charter. I'd be happy to provide further legal information about why that charter requirement is there, why it's a mandatory requirement, as well as Prop 218 implications. As Mr. Milano suggests, there is a case in Los Angeles. However, I would submit that Los Angeles and Glendale have different charters, and I think it's comparing apples and oranges to suggest that because it may have been found illegal in the Los Angeles case, that the same would apply to Glendale with a charter provision that dates back to the 1940s. As I said, I'd be happy to answer further questions, or perhaps this could be a subject of further discussion if need be.
Mrs. Steiger?
I'd also like to make one correction. Mr. Milano may have misspoke when he said that there were electric funds returned, and it was water funds. It has that particular case that Mr. Milano refers to has to do with water, not electric.
And I'd like to
That's
have
accurate.
one point of clarification. So the requirement is two commissioners to agendize an item. So the point is, if one commissioner speaks to me about putting an item on agenda, is that appropriate? That since I'm the president, I can agendize an item once a commissioner has made that request, and I felt that's appropriate.
Absolutely. And requirement is a bit strong. As I tried to say, and I hope I didn't misspeak, it is a recommended procedure, and it is the procedure that's followed by the Glendale City Council. So it would be our recommendation that that procedure be followed, but if a commissioner were to approach you as the chair of the commission and request an item to be agendized, you could certainly support that recommendation and put it on the agenda.
Any other comments or questions?
Not a question, but a overall comment in the timing of things, and that is, if we do have the ability to look into or have a discussion about a specific action item that GWP is proposing to put before council, the timing ends up being very important in that by the time we might receive notification as an FYI, and let's say I am interested in having a discussion about that, and I call President Yao and express that interest, if it's already agendized on City Council in a week and our meeting's not another 3 weeks, then we're really looking at something past tense versus before a City Council vote is taken. And my point is not that the Commission should be a bottleneck on GWP getting its work done, but I would request that there be consideration on timing of things so that if there is interest from a commissioner to look into something, have a discussion about it before before it goes before City Council, that there's a opportunity to do so.
I would suggest in that instance, one option, although perhaps not the desirable one, would be to set up a special meeting. But I know that GWP and Glenn Steiger in particular is very committed to working with the Commission to proactively bring things to you so that you're not in that situation, like you said, where you don't have enough time to consider the issues.
Thank you.
And also to Commissioner Armenian's point that certain items gets brought to the Commission a little late because the issues that they have to resolve and they have to move forward by bringing up to the Council. And so is there any way to maybe have the option to hold that item, even though we don't want to be the bottleneck, but to make the request to staff to hold off an item before it goes to Council until the Commission gets to review it? Is that an option that we have?
Well, the commission could do so. I guess it would be our hope that wouldn't happen too frequently. I think the better, more desirable outcome would be that Glendale Water and Power commits to bringing things to you when it can in advance. There are situations where a matter is time sensitive and it simply cannot wait, but in circumstances where it could, and if it was the desire of the Commission, then certainly that could occur. As I said before, I think a special meeting is another and perhaps better alternative in that scenario.
And I just want to make clear kind of where I'm coming from with my line of questioning and my desire. It's not from the perspective of digging into everything, but if there's a contribution where we could improve something that's being proposed based upon the robust experience on this Commission, that's kind of my angle in terms of where I'm coming from. It would give us the opportunity to make something better and improve it versus not just oversight for the sake of oversight.
Well, thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, then we can move on to the next item, please.
Item number 4C, underwater chromium-6 removal studies.
President Yao, Commissioners, Mr. Steiger, I'm Pat Hayes, Principal Civil Engineer, GWP Water. I'd like to introduce Leighton Fong, our Civil Engineer 2, who's been handling chrome issues, to give a briefing to you on what's happening on chrome removal. Leighton Fong.
Thank you, Pat. Members of the Commission, Glenn. Little background. Phase 1 of our chromium study was mainly a pilot study of just the chemistry of hexavalent chromium. Phase 2, we had some funding from EPA to conduct a pilot study. And from this study, they identified 2 technologies that were really effective in removing hexavalent chromium from drinking water. There was not a lot of knowledge beforehand, and chromium was kind of an emerging contaminant, not much concern. Phase 3, which is where we are now, we are building 2 projects. One is the weak-base anion project at one of the wells actually in Los Angeles on Goodwin Street, GS3. That's a 425 capacity ion exchange, but there's a little bit more than typical ion exchange where you can regenerate like a water softener. So this is going to be a single pass and then disposed. It is not going to regenerate well. The other one is only 100 GPM reduction coagulation filtration unit, which is going to be the combined effluent from the 4 north wells, and it'll be adjacent to the Glendale operable unit. And this is only a one-year demonstration for the 100 GPM. So that would just demonstrate the effectiveness of this technology. So those facilities now are built, and we are going through startup process now. So there's a couple of bugs that they're working out. The chemicals, the resin is loaded. There's a CO2 to reduce pH. That's been loaded. And then the chemicals at the RCF, there's a ferrous sulfate as a coagulant and a reductant. And then the filter media has been loaded. So we're getting ready to do all the startup and actually put it online. I think they're hoping to get everything running by the end of this month. That was really short, but was there any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
Next item, please.
Also underwater, a Chevy Chase update.
Hello again. The update on Chevy Chase Reservoir Construction Project. Construction started January of 2008, and in August of this past year, we reached substantial completion, at which point the reservoir, which consists of 2 cells, and a new pump station were put into service. In the intervening time to the present, most of the work is involved backfilling the reservoir surrounds and the roof and landscaping the property to restore it to a condition where golf can be played. For those of you not familiar, this is a fee simple property that the city owns, but has a perpetual easement for the golf operations that go on above it. We have completed most of that work. The remaining work is really on the punch list level, and that work continues now. If we were given a straight shot at it, we would probably be done in about 2 weeks' time with the remaining issues. I should report that on December 12th, we had a significant rain event occur in that area, and not the project itself, but a related project that is part of what we've been doing is a storm drain improvement. And being the fall season, there was an accumulation of debris. The debris blocked a new drain system we put in and caused some flooding, which subsequently damaged some of the work that was being done in terms of replacing sod and getting the course operational. So some of that's been mitigated, but there remains to be a bit more work to be done on that. As of the 31st, we removed the fences, and as was our agreement with the golf course to make it available, we're in negotiations, which I cannot get into great detail with the golf course owners, the new owners at this time. So we're hopeful that things will get resolved relatively quickly here. And we intended to show you a DVD today, rather than we're recognizing there might be a technical problem in doing that that'll disrupt the remaining presentations. So for today, we have for you your own copy of the DVD, which we can distribute. And we hope to show you the actual DVD at the next meeting. And what it is about a 7-minute run that we had produced with GTV6, which provides a pretty good summary of the project from start to finish. We had some construction cameras on the site. One of the at least one of the things I think is particularly cool is there's a time-lapse view of what happened in terms of the construction of that over the year and a half that the project was in major construction. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to accept them.
Questions or comments? Well, I just want to congratulate you and staff again for a job well done on finishing the Chevy Chase Reservoir. I know we had that ceremonial event, but it was canceled due to rain. But hopefully that would be rescheduled, because I think the public will be interested in looking at something that's done greatly by the staff, and also a good welcome to the new owners, at least, to celebrate the accomplishments of staff.
Thank you, and we're hoping to get that rescheduled fairly soon. It's still an open issue, though, to be resolved.
Thank you. Any comments? Next item, please.
Item 4D, under electric, reliability indices.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chairman Yao, members of the Commission. Ramon Abueg, Assistant General Manager of Electric Services. We submitted to your report of the summary for the outages that we had in December, and I'd like to go over that with you here. In 2009, we had 2 outages, one of them pretty significant, and the real cause of the outage, if we have to look at the root cause, is we had very high wind conditions the day or the night of December 22nd. As a result of that outage, we had a tree that actually broke from the wind that fell on the primaries, which is, I believe, one of the commissioners' neighborhood was affected by this outage. But what happened at about 6 p.m., 6:01 p.m., we had a tree right around Nibley Park that fell on the primary. And the reason I'm showing this map is to explain as to why, if you look across the street, the neighbors have lights and you may not have lights. The reason for that, where the tree was affected, there was a primary wire here that was affected, and the only disconnecting means we have in order to maintain or to do the replacement safely was over here. There's what we call a cutout. We had to open this up, and so anything beyond this that's on Loreto Drive, on Rosmoyne Avenue, and I believe some on Mountain Avenue were affected by the outage. So the original outage, we had 450 customers out. We were able to recover an hour or 20 minutes later, the majority of it, but there were still 110 customers that were still out, and the outage, I apologize for it, was about 7 hours and 46 minutes. And again, the reason for that, there were 2 spans, what we call 2 spans of primaries that we had to replace. There was a huge tree that fell on it, and our crews really work hard to get the power restored as soon as we can. The second outage is, again, because of the wind, we had a palm front that was blown that started about the same time. And this is also a contributing factor in how we responded, because we have 2 major circuits that went out. We had 1 crew, we had to call them in, it was late. And this outage affected about 2,300 customers for about 30 minutes. We have a very, very extensive tree trimming program. People ask, why do palm fronds cause us problems? Our program is to keep them away from the power lines, but when the wind's blowing like that night, I think the wind was blowing about 70 miles an hour, the dead palm fronds that way up there, when the wind blows, they disconnect, they can land anywhere, and we can't control that. So this caused, as a result, we had an outage for about 30 minutes. Now, to review, the 12-month reliability index that we had, including the outages of December, so this is from January to December, our SAFE, or the System Average Interruption Frequency Index, is about 0.78. Our goal is to be below 1.0. We're way within the goals, and what that means is that for SAFE, the reason for 1 is what we're saying is if you live in Glendale, the chance or likelihood of you being out of power for a year is about 1. And that's the goal, is to have basically 1 outage per year per customer. But because of the average and ratios where the problems are, some customers may experience 2 outages a year, but most customers will probably expect 0. That's really what we're looking at. So for the last 5 years that we have been tracking this, just to show you how we're performing, we track this on a Actually, we track this on a daily basis, but we report on a monthly average over 12 months. As you can see, over the 5 years, we had some major problems in 05-06. So you can see on this graph, and we're showing some improvement on our SAFE index. Okay. So our goal is to be below 1.0. Currently, we're meeting that goal. Based on the number of outages that we've had in the last 5 years, just to show in perspective where we are, in 2005 we had about 90 or so outages. 2006 we had over 100, and since then it's been declining, and we hope to continue to show that decline in the next reports. Okay. Oops, that's a repeat. And then the other index that we track is called the SIDI, which is the System Average Interruption Duration Index. What that means is we take the total number of customers affected, the duration that they're out, take the sum total of that, and divide that by all the customers that we serve. And our goal, basically this is our measure of how quickly we can recover power. Our goal is 40 minutes, and actual right now is 43. So we're slightly above our goal, and we're striving to beat that goal. And looking at over the 5 years, again, it's almost identical to the safety index, the graph that we have. We've shown some improvement, but as you can see, this month we exceeded that our goal, or not exceeded, but we didn't meet our goal this month, but it's slightly by 3 minutes. And those long outages, the 7 hour, 46 minutes, that's a major contributing factor. It may be just one big event with so many customers, and that would be enough to basically affect our index. And the other one is, had you been affected by an outage, the other index that we use is called the KD, which is the System Average Interruption Duration. I'm sorry, this should be Customer Average Interruption Duration Index. Our goal is 40 minutes, and right now the average of every customer, if you take all the customers affected divided by the total number of customers actually affected, the average is about 54 minutes, again slightly above higher than I want it to be for our response time. As you can see, as we're tracking this, we got below, we're meeting our goals, but we're staying above it, and we got above it during the months during the past 3-4 months. And this is really related directly to our response time, how quickly we're getting and resolving the issue. And some of the contributing factors as well, and this is the outages, if they happen during off hours, it takes, and we count that. Some utilities, like Edison, for example, they don't take the response time is when they get to the site. We count everything from the time the circuit breaker goes out until the last customer goes back into service. Edison, they count it from the first time the first customer comes back online, they consider the outage dealt with. We don't do it that way. So our indices, although we are more stringent in our measurement, our numbers are still better than Edison. So, okay.
It's because we have 50,000 square miles of territory we're covering.
I understand, but this is just to put it in perspective. We do go from the minute that it goes out to the minute everybody comes back, and not the other way around. So for the last 12 months, as you know, we've been tracking what the culprits are, and the main reason for doing this is we do keep track of what outages are preventable. Those outages that are preventable, we can almost guarantee you with some certainty that won't happen again. We try to fix it, get to the root cause. The ones I can't really fix, the balloons, the birds, squirrels, there's certain things that we are doing to avoid it, to prevent it, but we're not succeeding in our fight with the war with the squirrels. So, but anyway, so this year we had 53 outages, which is less than, slightly less than the total number of outages that we had last year, which was at 58, I believe. So with that, are there any questions, comments, or concerns?
I have a question. First of all, I'm very happy to say I'm the customer that experienced 0 a year. So, yes, I have not had an outage recently. Question, looking at your charts, it's obvious that back in 2005, all the indices were a lot higher. So I know earlier you mentioned that you're tracking the reason for outage, and you're trying to prevent or work on the ones that you can prevent. Mm-hmm. So besides that, is there anything that you are doing in bringing the indices down?
We are, as you know, we have also been investing a lot of capital projects. Since 2005, we spent in excess of $100 million to rebuild the infrastructure. That's the main reason why when in the past, when we have major wind outages, I can almost assure you that we will get calls and we will have several outages happening at one time. The improvements we've made, we replace when we can. We don't repair. We don't patch up anything anymore. And a bigger contributing factor, too, is the 12 kV conversion that we have done in the majority of the areas. But the 12 kV conversion actually not only improved the system delivery, but the gap between the wires overhead, when things fall on them, they tend not to short out. And the winds, when they blow, they tend not to slap the wires together. So that's one. We've also replaced a lot of the old cables. We're replacing equipment. There's the system protection that we have done to make things more coordinated so that we can isolate the problem a lot quicker. So overall, the contribution of our response time and the investment we made into the system is paying off.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I noticed that by the way, thank you for the presentation. I noticed that the largest number of caused failures was equipment failure, 13 out of the 53. Could you comment on what exactly equipment failure means and what might be done to redress that?
Yeah, we had some devices. We had one outage where we had I would call not the smartest device. It's just a connector that failed in a substation. What we have, although we're trying to get ahead of it, we still have an old system, and we're not getting to it fast enough. And some of them are actually, I would call them old, and are not quite beyond their life expectancy, but they're getting pretty close. We're trying to address those. So in the equipment failure we had, it's mainly in the substation side and also some switches. If a switch or a cable fail underground, we call that an equipment failure. It may look like from the report it's something we could have prevented. There's one cable failure that, due to its exposure to weather, it's been underwater, and it's the old crosslink polyethylene. I don't know if you're familiar with the type of insulation we deal with, the XLPE. They have what we consider a treeing problem. Once they get exposed to moisture, it's very, very difficult to find where that problem is, but it just breaks down on the next stress that it experiences. We have a program to replace the cable that we have. However, because of their location, and we have about 230 miles of underground cables, and about 100 miles of those are still crosslink poly. We don't have enough resources or the budget to just go out and fix and replace all of them. So what we're doing is we're gradually, one of the rules we have is when we touch one area, we're doing it all at one time. So we do have a program to replace, but it's systematic, but not a blanket, let's just replace them all. Mm-hmm. But when they do fail, we don't fix them anymore. We pull new cables. Unlike in 05, the difference is in 05 we would patch them up, or we would splice them and just put in the same type of cable. We don't do that anymore. We would pull the entire run. So that's why some of the outage too are getting longer. It's because we are replacing as opposed to repairing.
But over time, you expect that particular cost to decline relative to the others because of this program you have of replacement. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And one other question I had, some of your trend lines were straight lines, which I presume were least square regressions. Others were curved, which I don't know what that would be based on. Could you comment on that?
Not really. I have to ask my engineer that did
okay,
that. We're trying to just to trend it.
All right.
Just to show whether or not we're improving or...
Oh, okay. Well, I couldn't tell whether it was just somebody's guess or whether it was actually mathematically based. So anyway, I have something to pass on. Thank you.
Okay.
One comment. It'll be interesting to see that last table that you have, to see that over a period of time, so you can see where the improvements have come in. Just to compare, just want to see if the squirrel population is changing.
I can tell you last year that we had more balloon problems. We had about 13 balloon problems last year and only 4 squirrel problems. This year they reversed each other. So again, my nightmare, I kept telling Mr. Steiger, is to see a squirrel tied to a Mylar balloon.
No, no, that was a joke, but it'll be interesting to see for some of the preventable problems how they've changed over a period of time as well with the investments that the city has made.
Yeah, we have that data. I actually thought about showing you how the problems are shifting a little bit, but I will do that in the next report. I'll give you a good report.
I have a comment and a question. I saw a report from our friends up north at PG&E about the balloon problems spiking around June for them. So I don't know if there's any sort of customer education we could do in the newsletter prior to June, if that matches our experience, or if we have a different trend here in Glendale to do some customer education prior to where we're seeing the spike. That would be, I think, helpful to educate customers, because I venture to guess most people don't realize the potential impact of those innocent-looking balloons.
Yeah, in the source you would see annually. There are 2 periods where we see a spike of balloon problems: Valentine's Day and graduation. Graduation around June. That's consistent with our experience. So that's when we start seeing a lot of the balloons coming out, are those 2 time periods. So next month is coming up, so I think we would have another reminder not to release them in the air.
You also have it on the Circuit TV comments on it, correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay, all right.
The second question I have has to do with the outages, using the Ross Moines one as an example, the 7-hour one. What is the liability of GWP in cases where there's actual damage to a customer's home, because not from the branch itself, but actually from the spike in power? Because there's one customer who approached me who said most of their appliances and computers all got fried, who happened to live on Ross Moines, very near where the wires, right behind where the wires went down at the park. So I'm wondering what GWP's liability is and what sort of recourse that customer might have.
Well, the customer can always file a claim. However, any damages beyond the meter, we look at that closely. One of the things we look at is there's a lot of old houses in Glendale that was designed based on a 2-wire system, which is just the neutral and the hot. And there's still a lot of houses in Glendale that are not properly grounded. So we take a look at that, whether or not they had proper grounding, and what we say basically in our ordinance is that we are not responsible for any damages on the customer premises.
At all, or if they have grounding and it still happens?
Yeah, if it's grounding is improper, we would take a look at that and make a recommendation.
And how would you suggest to the public that they reach out? What's the best way for them to communicate to GWP in those instances?
They can call us. A lot of times before they file a claim, they would contact us and ask us to take a look at what they have. And I'm not sure this customer has contacted GWP because I didn't see any documentation.
Yeah, I suggested to them that they contact, but I don't know if they did.
No, I think a claim may have been filed, but
and
I don't recall.
That's the correct procedure, is that if someone feels that they're aggrieved, they would file a claim with the city clerk's office. And it's always going to be very dependent on the facts and circumstances, of course, of what might have occurred in that case, whether or not the city's at fault or whether it's, on the customer side, for example.
So should the customer contact GWP or city clerk first?
City clerk's office.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Next item, please.
Item 4E, legislation, the monthly regulatory and legislative update.
We have the second item, E2.
No, I'm sorry. I apologize. Glorietta substation update.
Commissioner Chan, one of the questions, what are we doing to improve? This is one of the projects that we're working on to improve reliability of the system, which is the Glorietta substation. Just to give you an update, we gave you a report a few months ago for where we were, what progress we made, and this is just a status report. I'm happy to report that we have commissioned, or we have hired a consultant / EPC contractor to help us with the project. And before I get into that, I just want to demonstrate to you that things. Remember I said when we go into an area, what we try to do is to just touch it once. It's what we did in this area. If you recall, North Glendale, especially Montrose going out all the way north to the Canadian Park, we only have one substation that feeds that area. There's a wide area that's being served from one substation. And the closest one we have to that is what we call the Glorietta substation, and there's a Glorietta service area. And North Glendale is all 12 kV. Glorieta substation, the closest area, is being fed at 4 kV. There's a compatibility issue, and we also have reliability issue in a way that in a major catastrophic event, we won't be able to support both areas from different substations. So one of the things we've done is when we're doing the 4 kV to 12 kV conversion, we took a look at the things that we can do with this. So in this particular project, we have converted the areas being served from Glorieta substation from 4 kV to 12 kV. So that whole area has been converted, and what we've done in order to mitigate, to serve that, is we run or we extended some of the feeders that we have coming from Rosemont substation, which is from the south, and from Montrose substation coming from the north, so that now Glorieta substation is being fed from 2 different substations. So it's now running at 12 kV as opposed to 4 kV, but we're 1 substation short. Just to refresh your memory, Glorieta substation is right next to Glorieta Park, and this is what it looks like. What we're trying to do with this is basically to take this is another view from the street, and our initial idea was just to install what we call a gas insulated substation. Again, my point is, if you ask an electrical engineer to design this is what it would look like. But we did hire some experts, some architects, to design it, and this is what it's going to look like. At the end of the day, the substation will look like a quote-unquote somewhat industrialized building. And the good news about this is we work closely with the planning department, and they have given us a lot of their input, a lot of their suggestions on how we can make this more compatible with the environment. In fact, we have met with the homeowner association, and I think they were going to send out some literatures to their membership to show what this project is doing, and they're very excited about it. I believe we got their support on this project. So that's what's going to look like in the front coming from Verdugo. And just major milestones on where we are with this project. Last month, the geotechnical survey was completed. We're trying to get all the building permits completed this month so we can start demolition and complete that site demolition and grading by April of this year. By December 10, we think we would have the building construction completed. This is all the buildings. And then we would complete all the electrical components of that by February 11, get the wiring done, and get all testing and commissioning by April 11th, so that by May 11th, we would have the substation online. This is a critical schedule for us. Remember, I pointed out that we are 1 substation less. What that means, in the summer of this year, if it gets really hot, we will have very limited resources on how we can power up that area. So if we do have a major problem or a circuit that goes out, it would take us longer to restore the power because we won't have too many places to power that from. It would require significant switching from our side. We do have the switching programs pre-designed, pre-developed, depending on where the outage will be. But instead of switching from the substation like we would normally do, it would require that we go out in the field, do a lot of field switching. This is where we are now, is what we term, I think you heard that term from me several times, we are in an N-1 condition in this area. So typically we would operate with X substation, we've taken one out, and we're in the process of replacing it with the goal of having us exposed to this condition only during the 1 summer period. Okay, so we're very aggressive with this. All long lead items we've ordered, transformers, which takes about 40 weeks, breakers, switchgear, all the long lead items have been ordered, so it's just a matter of really getting everything assembled at the site. And with that, are there any questions?
Well, I have just a quick one. Since the last comment you mentioned was that there's potential for some disruption if a heat wave occurred this summer, what is the plan that we have in place to notify those residents, or what is the likelihood of having that disruption? Because do we have a historical data to show that if the heat wave happens for a certain amount of days, a certain temperature, that the potential disruption will occur?
No, the heat wave itself will not cause an interruption. It's when we have an interruption during the heat wave that we may have some difficulties or a longer time to restore power. The heat wave itself, we have plenty of capacity. Let me rephrase that. We have capacity. We have allowed for that. But we don't have any backup or any contingency to pick them up from a substation because we're using up the capacity that we have right now. And in answer to your question, how do we notify? We plan to meet with the neighborhood again, with the homeowners association in that area. We talked to them already. The presidents are aware. We have explained to them the situation that we're in. And they're supposed to send some newsletter to their members with the pictures and also what the risks are. We think the risk is minimal. But I want to point it out that there's still a risk that we're taking at this time.
Besides the communication, are we looking at possible demand-side management programs or conservation strategies targeting that area? With the smart grid coming in, are we going to be able to install maybe meters at that location first? Are we looking at anything like that for that area?
I haven't thought about that part of it, but it's something we can
This
talk
is
to
summer.
neighbors.
Yeah, this is summer of 2010.
Right.
11?
2010.
10.
It's this coming.
Yeah, it's summer of 2010. Are we going to be able to?
Well, this summer, we're doing our proof of concept on AMI, and I won't get into a long dissertation about that, but essentially it's the pilot to make sure everything works properly.
Right.
And that will probably, if all goes well, culminate sometime around June of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time we get to that point, not sure that we'll have the ability to just target a place right after that. It's going to be difficult. If this were the following year,
Right.
no problem at all. We'd have no problem. So we'll take a look to see if there's something we can do. It's possible.
Yeah, I think that would be better than just leaving it to chance and just hoping that it's going to be a very, very small issue.
Our experience so far is there's only about 1 or 2 weeks during the summer that we need to be concerned with. And it hasn't happened in the last couple of years. That's why I said the chance is very minimal that we'll have any problems.
Right. But however, if I were a resident in that area, I would not want to have that kind of a risk. So, thanks.
Questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Gregg. And next item, please.
Item 4E, legislation, monthly regulatory and legislative update. Lana Haddad.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission, staff. My name is Lana, and I'm here to give you your monthly update on regulatory and legislative issues. This is going to be kind of it's a long report written because it was taking over from the end of November clear through December and then part of January. But what I want to do today in the oral part, because I can tell some of people are getting a little maybe weary. I just want to give you the brief highlights sort of what's been going on. So basically on the regulatory front, CARB has been very busy and they have been dealing with the renewable electricity standard, as you remember. I'll also be doing a little bit of review just to give you a little bit of background, and then we'll move forward, and it's all going to be building on the report that comes before it, so I want to give you a little bit of background to go along with. At the end of October, the CARB released the Renewable Electricity Standard Draft Concept Paper, and in that paper they had provided 6 main points that we had taken up as a utility. Those were that they wanted to include an exemption for utilities that had a load of less than 500 gigawatt hours per year. They wanted the renewable electricity credits, the RECs, to count in full. They were not going to be limiting the eligible resources to in-state resources only. There was going to be no change in treatment for large zero-carbon sources, such as large hydro or nuclear. And there was going to be the reporting, monitoring, verification, and compliance was going to be dealt with all 3 major regulatory agencies, so CEC, CPUC, and then also CARB, although the precise rules of those agencies is still unclear, and it's still unclear to this day. Finally, they were taking under consideration measurement of the RES as a reduction metric for GHGs, greenhouse gases, as opposed to a straight percentage. And the utilities actually have recommended they do that as a megawatt, as a percentage reduction in in terms of the megawatt hours. So the SCAPA comment that was provided, we did support them utilizing an exemption for small utilities. We wanted to continue to apply the current RPS eligibility standards while remaining open to including additional technologies and liberalizing the existing RPS program limitations. We agreed with minimal geographic limits on eligibility. We did want them to retain the megawatt hour compliance metric as opposed to doing the conversion into a greenhouse gas. It seemed a little complicated and not maybe as easily understood by the public. Finally, we were asking that they would apply penalties only at the end of 2020 rather than at the interim compliance periods. We wanted them to allow banking and trading of credits, and then also to exclude low-carbon fuel sources and loads served with electricity obtained from combined heat. They've also been very busy at work on the cap and trade. As you will undoubtedly, first state in the nation to be moving ahead with cap and trade. One of the bodies that has been assisting CARB in the development of
cap and trade is the Economic Allocation and Allowance Committee. They put out their recommendation, and ultimately the recommendation is to do it primarily almost 100% through auction, which actually does not bode well for the utilities. As a result, all of the utilities, electric utilities in California, have formed what's called the joint utilities, and they issued a letter to the EAC chair, and that was received on January 8th. We've already received some engagement back from Mr. Goulder, Dr. Goulder, and he is engaging with the SCAPA and the joint utilities on those issues, so he is currently in conversation with them. And today, in fact, the EAC had its last meeting to finalize its recommendations that are going to be going forward to CARB. The legislative update in California on the state level, as you all know, a historic a water package was passed in November, and the one outstanding bill would be a $1.14 billion bond for infrastructure and construction in California on the water issue. One remains to be seen and decided by the voters, whereas the other 4 policy bills did pass in November. On the energy front, at this time, there is no draft language out on the renewable portfolio standard that was in legislation the first year of a 2-year legislative cycle. However, it's almost 100% certain that we're going to be seeing that coming up in the next couple weeks or so. On the federal level, one of the things that we've been working very busily on is Glendale receives a certain amount through MWD, which receives it from the Hoover Dam, it's electricity from Hoover Dam. And as a result of the contract that was signed, which is expiring in 2017, the 3 different states that are affected, California, Nevada, and Arizona, have had 2 years' worth of meetings, the primary players, to come to an agreement, because Hoover Dam power is actually allocated at the federal level by legislation. What they've done is come to an agreement that the existing parties should receive their historic allocation in exchange for 50 years worth and it's a contract of 50 years, in exchange for 50 years worth of support for environmental support for the areas. That currently, right now, we are looking at about 50 members of the California delegation who are already signed on board. California has been very united in D.C. on Capitol Hill, so that's actually a very good sign. We're having a little bit more difficulty getting the Arizona representation delegates as well as Nevada on board, and those issues remain to be seen. We have a trip coming, I believe, in end of February to D.C., and so we'll be reporting back any additional developments that happen there. Nutshell version, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
I was present when there was the study session with City Council on the $11 billion, not the bond measure itself, but the water issues in general. But I remember that this bond measure was discussed at that meeting, and the public probably is going to have a little bit of a sticker shock on this, but I'm wondering whether we have the GWP has any specific position at this point on that bond measure.
I don't believe that actually GWP can advocate for that one way or the other, and I'd have to defer to my legal on that one. But I do believe that the City Council can take a resolution in support or opposition to legislation like that, so that might be something to consider.
That's absolutely correct.
Do we know whether they are considering such a move at this point?
It hasn't gone forward to them at this point.
To follow up on the question just asked, does the Commission have the ability to make that suggestion to Council?
Well, the commission likewise is not, does not serve in a lobbying capacity, but so that really would not be within your role.
Okay.
The other item I noticed, maybe from the email package that the staff sent out, was the initiative, potential initiative for a 2/3 vote that impact public utilities. Was that something that you can briefly mention to us, and what's the status of that?
Well, now that City Council has actually taken a resolution of opposition to that, I can brief you on that, and I'm going to look to you for some support, Mr. Steiger. Basically, PG&E had sponsored legislation or initiative to create a 2/3 voter requirement if a municipal utility, public power, wanted to expand its area of service. But the 2/3 requirement would be both of the voters in the service area existing as well as the service area that was going to be affected. So if the city had annexed a part of a neighboring, location, we were going to be providing service to another area. In order to do that, and we were, say, encroaching on an IOU's territory, we would have to get approval from 2/3 of both sets of voters, which is a very high standard for the voters to meet. So it was something that was very much sort of in opposition to public power, and it's kind of designed specifically for a PG&E system up there, but it was a statewide initiative, so it would have had potential ramifications up and down the state. City Council did vote 4-0-1 because Councilmember Najarian was not there in support of a resolution of opposition to that particular initiative.
So it really does impact all utility in general, because even though we might not be looking to expand beyond the city of Glendale or into Pasadena, but it could potentially impact the way the operations of staff, because it potentially any capital investment in the future could be impacted by this 2/3 vote if it does pass.
It really there were some reports in the newspaper that described it that way, but honestly, this bill was specifically aimed towards what's known as municipalization, which is where a community can form its own municipal electric system, like we have here in Glendale, and also to make it more difficult to determine a community choice aggregation program, which we haven't seen much around here, but it is possible. It's allowed by law, whereas a community can aggregate the energy purchase through separate providers, but still along the same distribution system as, say, an Edison, for example, or even a GWP. So there's really two issues. One is a municipalization issue. The other one is community choice aggregation. That's really the focus of the bill. It really doesn't prevent us generally from engaging in additional capital expenditures.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
One last question. On the CARB issue, and I think I've brought this issue up before, I think what we're seeing is the market forces that would allow us to purchase the power we would like are being overwhelmed by regulatory constraints. And that means some kind of premium is going to have to be put on power purchases by ratepayers because of the regulations. And, of course, the utility's kind of stuck in the middle. We've got the regulatory pressure on one side and concern from ratepayers on the other regarding their willingness to pay. Is that really a problem for GWP? And if so, how have we assessed that?
Well, just very briefly, I think that with the 33% RPS, for example, that there are definitely rate impacts to the requirement of a 33% renewable portfolio standard to any utility, particularly when you consider our utility, which purchases many of its resources whenever possible. So there is that concern. The other thing is that overall in the public power community, there seems to be a shift now to focusing more on the ratepayers. And in fact, LADWP just recently hired a ratepayer advocate. That was a very controversial move for some people, I think. But the voice of the ratepayer is sort of getting lost in a lot of the requirements, the regulatory changes that are leading us toward this 33% RPS.
Yeah, I guess my question is, has that been a problem for GWP in terms of its own ratepayers, or have we made that assessment? And
let me clarify. So you're asking, are the costs associated with the The AB 32.
increased costs associated with regulatory constraints in our power supply purchases.
What we've done, in fact, we had a forum last year to try to educate customers, and we've done everything, but we've really initiated quite a bit of publicity on this issue to try to get more public support, because obviously it will have an impact on our customers. There is no question. And it's really twofold. There will be an impact just generally because as we go to 33% renewables, generally renewables cost more. So that's one impact. But it could be as much as double that if, in fact, cap and trade goes as it may go. The costs associated with cap and trade are substantial. So we could have a double hit over the course of the next 10 years, which would be a large burden to our customers. We continue to educate our customers so that they can make their voices heard, because they're the ones that are going to have to pay it. And we would prefer to not see that. We obviously want to see more renewables, but we don't want to overly burden customers where it's not necessary.
I'd like to point out, I think we have kind of a socially contradictory course in that we're putting emphasis on making these expenses for different energy resources. At the same time, we're looking at trying to reduce costs, especially to the people who are in the lower economic strata and have trouble paying for this. And I'm wondering if the costs of the new power resources might actually overwhelm any savings that might be made for people in the lower economic strata with the programs that we have in place for them.
It's possible.
Yeah,
it's possible.
And I think that I'm not asking for anything to be done about it, but I think that awareness needs to be there, that we're kind of working at cross purposes for that. I had a second question, and that's whether GWP through SCAPA or any other agency is trying to educate our legislators and regulators regarding the situation they're putting utilities in, which is caught between the scylla of ratepayer concern over increased costs and the Charybdis of regulatory pressure, if I may use that metaphor.
Absolutely. That is actually the very crux of what we're doing with our educational and our outreach toward our elected officials. So,
and your monthly updates are very helpful in that regard because it gives a forum for this to be heard by the ratepayers on TV. So thank you for that. Well, thank you then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Todd. You have a call for the speaker on this item? For E, yes. I'd like to invite Mr. Herma Milano to the podium.
Commission President Yao, Commissioners, City staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I want to apologize first for coming as often to speak on these items, but I figured that this being for a couple of you the first time around, and since we missed the last month's meeting, I wanted to express some the things the way I understand this legislative agenda. In the case of Glendale, for example, many of you may not know that the Glendale Water and Power does not cover all of Glendale. You know, the section of the north part of the city, like the annex, I believe is covered by Southern California Edison. So the way I interpret it, Mr. Steiger, you can correct me on this one, is that should Glendale Water and Power wish to service the annex, which is already an incorporated part of the city of Glendale, and if this law were to pass, then I believe they would need a two-thirds vote of the individuals who are within the GWP and two-thirds of the area of the annex as well, even though they're part of the same city. Now, given what I know now, as of today, with regard to the rates, the residents in the annex are paying less per kilowatt hour residential than are the residents of Glendale Park that are serviced by Glendale Water and Power. On the other comment I wanted to add on Mr. Miller's observation is that you present a really good dichotomy here of the potential and the expected future increases in the rate of electricity as we move towards renewable sources of energy which are more expensive. But I think that this commission can really truly consider something that we really haven't considered significantly in the past, is what is the minimum expected usage per household per day in kilowatt hours. Because once you define that, you say, for example, that the expected usage as the very core minimum, like the lowest cost possible, let's say is 10 kilowatt hours per day per household, then you can say that would be what would be the minimum that you will allow for a very low cost reduction and keep it affordable to a lot of people. And then the differential additional cost would then be passed on to those individuals who are using a hell of a lot more power than that. Pardon my expression. The reason why I bring this up is that I found many cities truly promoting what they consider a minimal usage for which they will have a rate that is appropriate and affordable. And I don't think that we are necessarily doing that. We are providing discounts, should we say, and rebates and so forth, which are minimal amounts. But I think that this commission should truly consider those limits as well with the usage of water. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments?
We do have tiered rates on electricity to encourage conservation and so forth.
We do.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Next item, please.
Item 4F, Customer and Support Services, a Citizen Notification System Demonstration by Melissa Benson.
The mic on?
I'm not usually commented that I was too quiet. Thank you. This citizen notification system, before I bring it up, has two parts to it, really. One part is sometimes called a reverse 911, in which we've got a database of telephone numbers. If there's an emergency, we are able to do a broadcast and contact the community. The first time that we used that, to my knowledge, was for the station fires, for the evacuations. The other aspect to this system is one in which you can opt in. Let's say that you want to be notified of community events. You might want to be notified of police activity, that sort of thing. That is your choice as a Glendale resident. You may also wish us to have a different piece of personal information for you. Let's say we've got your landline at home, but you're not home to answer it much. You might want us to have your cell phone instead. So your access as a citizen to this database allows you to customize both of those things. First of all, the messages that you do get and how you are notified of them. Okay? I don't want anybody to be intimidated in our listening and watching audience by signing up for this. So I thought I'd run you through real quick what it takes. I think everybody will see how quick and easy it is and hopefully be encouraged to do so. I do live here in Glendale and I've already signed up. Let me get onto our website here. I was told this mouse was a little bit funky, and it is. I have used a mouse before. It is making me a little crazy. This is like an awful video game. Okay. That would be because it's upside down. Okay.
Yeah.
Things get easier from here, I promise. Okay, so we're going to start here. My apologies. We're going to start here at the Glendale Water and Power website, okay? We've got a link right here that says sign up for emergency notification. This is where you need to go, right here on the front of our page. It says sign up. Go ahead and click on that. Brings you right to our page here. Once you've signed up, you can click on Manage Profile. Once you've got a profile in there, you can make any changes you want. So whatever you've originally registered for, if you change your mind and want to make some edit to it, absolutely go ahead. To sign up for it, go ahead and click on Sign Up. This is the sign up page. I'm going to use a fake name, the name of a friend of my sister who does not live here. The username can be whatever you want. I'm going to make it this. Password. Notice right here it says, and this is the only I found personally a little difficult thing, was making up a password that, what do I want to say, that was paid attention to these requirements, yes. So I wouldn't have to struggle as much as I did with the mouse. I'm going to do it here. So I just made something up that was between 8 and 64 characters and had letters and numbers in it. My email address, I will put mine down here at the city. It won't let me go any further unless I fill these in, so thank you for watching me type. If I'd have only known in high school I would have been typing in front of people, I would have paid more attention.
You may have one extra character in the confirm password.
Thank you, which would not have confirmed my password. Thank you. That's all we need at this point. If you don't happen to have an email address, and I'll come back to this again, you can call us, and we've got a helpline, and we will sign you up. Right? So you don't have to have an email address. I want to make that very clear in order to sign up and give us what your preferences are, okay?
What's the phone number?
The phone number is at the bottom of this page, the bottom of every page, right here. All right, 818-550-4520. 818-550-4520. During regular business hours, we've got somebody to help you out. So please don't hesitate if you don't have email. Security question, you get to pick the security question. I will choose that one. And right here, I accept the terms of these terms of use. If you would like to read them, there is a link here you can go through. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to call that number. I won't go through those with you here. You must accept them in order to move forward. Last step is we've got this security word right here. If you can't read it, which occasionally comes up, you can ask for a new code. In this case, it seems pretty clear to me, so I'm going to type in the word that it says. And I hit submit. Oh, of course it is, because I live here. Of course it is. Great, I don't want to show everybody in the city my personal email. I might get invited to some fun parties. It won't let me go any further without it. All right. You know what, Glenn? I'm going to use you.
Uh-oh. Now we're in trouble.
And it is EIS.
Yes, it is.
Well, it's not like nobody knew it. Yeah, I do live here. I did sign up. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, you're right. I know, girl. I don't live here.
Okay. It will bring up another security word. That's okay. Just type in what you see. And again, if this intimidates anybody who's listening, please just call us. We'll do this for you. Okay. See, next time you guys are going to put me first.
We're going to bring in dinner pretty soon.
All right. I need a snack. Okay. Lunch seems a really long time ago. Okay. There we go. This is where I wanted to go. Notice that this is grayed out. You're going to get emergency alerts no matter what. Okay, we've got your number. We're going to go ahead and send them. But you do have, as I said before, the chance to give us a better number for you. Important community alerts. Oh, these question marks here, please click on them if you want a little further information about what exactly you're responding to. Community alerts are non-emergency or just information. You do not have to check any of these if you don't want to. If you're interested in road closures, if you're interested in things going on here at Glendale Water and Power, if you're interested in crime bulletins, you want to know what's going on, you can go ahead and check those. Ever change your mind, just check them again. Okay? I am a resident or I am registering a business. You have a business here, of course you might want to be notified of road closures, police activity, emergencies. So please, I invite our business listeners as well. First name, this is all personal information. I will put this in here very quickly for you. You have a middle initial, not necessary. Only the ones, the fields with the red asterisk are necessary. If you have a suffix, please go ahead and put that. This is the only choice right now is English only, in that we are only able to deliver messages in English. We are working on being able to expand that. If you have special needs, if you click yes here, you will get an expanded menu. So if you're looking for it and you don't see it, you just need to click yes, then you will. We want to know how we can best serve you. Are you hearing impaired, visually impaired, speech impaired? Do you have a wheelchair or some sort of mobility issue we need to know about? Again, thinking about emergency alerts. Do you have an oxygen tank we need to be aware of? Or are you dependent upon electricity? Please let us know. Okay? I won't click any of those. We've got one other area here, which is volunteer. So far, these are any special skills you might have. If you click yes here, we just want to know if you're CERT trained, if you'd be willing to help us out in an emergency. We might add some other things for volunteer opportunities, physicians, EMTs, things like that in the future, but at this point, this is all we've got available for you. This is a section that also talks about City of Glendale locations you care about. What if you live in North Hollywood, but your elderly mom lives here? Maybe you'll want to know about what's happening in her neighborhood. What's happening here in Glendale. These are other locations. You can add up to 5. Maybe it's your children's schools. Maybe it's you don't live here in Glendale, but you work here and you want to know what's happening before you head into work, that type of thing. So we want to give you the opportunity to add up to 5 other locations. This one location is required. Oh, that would be my home I would put in there. Select a special need or no. If you haven't done something right, it will tell you up here up at the top. So I have no special needs at this point. I'm not going to, and no for volunteer opportunities. This I'm going to put as my work address, just so you can see what the next screen will be. I'm going to put it here. There's my location name. This is where you would put home, work, whatever the location happens to be. I do spell way better than I type. Glendale, and here in California. This is the last page I was wanting to show you. Here's where you can give us alternate information. So I want you to have my home phone, business phone, mobile, any other phone that you might have. If you want us to be able to send you a text message, you can fill that in here. Your email address. If you have devices to help you if you're hearing impaired, please add that. If you've got a fax number, if we are able to fax these alerts, we absolutely will if you've put a fax number down. And this is the order of preference you want, both for emergencies in this left column and community alerts in the right. If I want you to contact me on my cell phone for emergencies, I may only want you to contact me at home if it's a community event. Okay, so I get to rank those. And that's it. I hit submit. I can change this at any time I want. And at the bottom of every page, it says questions. Contact us at, again, 550-4520 or email us. We monitor that every day. We will get back to you right away. And that's it. Questions?
What steps have been taken to ensure the privacy of this information? Is this information stored on city servers, or is it offsite at a private institution?
It's actually both. It's a great question. There is redundancy here. The company that we're working with is called Everbridge. It is located here in Glendale. We are taking the privacy of our customers and of this community very seriously. We are not selling this information. You have got to have a password to be able to get in and access it. If you forget your password, please call us. We'll help you out with that. But we are not sharing this information with anybody else.
What steps, if it's being stored on Everbridge's servers, what steps has Everbridge taken to ensure the privacy and security of this information?
Everbridge is a worldwide company that does this for many communities across the country. As far as the specifics of their redundancy or their security, where their servers are located, I know they've got a set of servers here in Glendale. Where their redundant site is, I'm not sure. And not being an employee of Everbridge, I can't speak more specifically to it than that. If that's a concern, I can come back to you with more specific information for you.
Yes, I would be interested, not from the redundancy perspective. I'm interested
from a security
in the
perspective.
Security of the information, to make sure that people who sign up, their information is guarded.
And that's a very, very important issue to our community. right now. Absolutely. Anybody else?
I just wanted to commend GWP and yourself and the others who worked on the system for developing it. I think it'll be a great asset to the community.
Absolutely. We've already gotten quite a good use out of it with the station fire.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I want to echo Commissioner Miller's comment. I also have a question. I apparently am already on the database. I received 2 messages with the station fire. So for somebody like me, I should still go in and create a register, right? Create a profile.
Absolutely. Please do, because again, this gives you the control to tell us when, I'm sorry, not when, hopefully never, hopefully we don't have any emergencies, but when we do, how we contact you and in what order we contact you. Like I said, maybe you would prefer to be contacted on your cell phone, but you received messages at home. You have the ability to change that when you get in and register. It's free to register. It is easy, and if you get stuck, we're here to help you.
And I'm just curious, is there an overlap in the 2 databases? Are they going to be able to find my old record and eliminate one, or am I going to get 3 messages next time?
Absolutely. No, we will send it according to what your preferences are. If we don't have preferences for you, we will send it to the record that we have in our database.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions? But the other thing I had was I noticed there's no requirement to be a resident, so anyone pretty much can sign up regardless if you have an account with GWP or not. Is that true?
Well, you've got to be able to give us one location here.
Like a physical address in the city?
A physical address here in the city. We've incorporated every possible zip code in our service area. If you can't claim one of those, you can't register here. But that hopefully will serve people who live somewhere else but work here, or like I said, maybe they live somewhere else but they have parents who live here or kids who live here. You might still have a vested interest in what's going on here in the city. So it's not so much a customer database.
Right. So potentially someone can use the 141, the address you enter in as a work location, and register if they live outside the city, and you can have multiple similar work addresses with multiple registrations, right?
Absolutely. Yes, we would further granulate that data by name, by contact number, and so forth. We've had many people sign up, which I think is such a sign of the times, where we had one household and 6 pieces of data because there were 2 parents and 4 kids, and they all had their own cell phones and all had their own email addresses, and they all wanted different things. We had one address, but all 6 people with different contact information.
Right. Is that still acceptable?
Absolutely. And we encourage that. Yeah, please do that.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Okay. Next item, please.
Item number 5, oral communications.
And for oral communications, Jackie, could you set the timer for 5 minutes? I do have multiple requests here, and I would like to make sure that there are for 5 minutes. I have one request that is 7 minutes, but I think due to the timing, I think I'm going to limit to all speakers to 5 minutes. The first speaker I'd like to invite up is Gary Cornell.
Chairman Yao, members of the Commission, and Mr. Steiger, I'm Gary Cornell. I'm a past president of Rancho San Rafael and current board member. Regretfully, my colleague, Mr. Kazazian, that was here, evidently had another prior appointment and couldn't wait. So hopefully he might be back. If he is, he can give me additional support here. And Mr. Chairman, I want to congratulate you on your appointment and your election. Maybe you can have staff give you a little guide. It's called, I have it myself since I do a lot of this, Thumb's Guide to Rules of Robert's Rules, that you could pinpoint here and so on. And I think during your governing of the various commissions, I think that'll be a good aid for you. I have two items I want to discuss here. One is, of course, most of you other members know me for recycled water. The other thing I experienced on customer service when I was here. I just wanted to start on recycled water. My first term as president, I came up here. It was a new management team. And that was in July of 1998. And we presented you, and it came across the needs of our association for getting recycled water up to our development. We have 550 units. If you check your records, we are the 5th largest water user of you. We're the only one that's not commercial. We just increased our HOA dues in light of the increase that you passed on to us. It was due necessity. Our members knew that. We explained all this. During this period of time we were waiting, a lot of developments came. Your new members, I don't know if Mr. Steiger in your orientation presented you with the technical extending recycled water to us. There was a technical report that came out in January 2006. It was revised, and then on my presentation, I believe it was in 2008 that I came here. I had an update here on this because we were able to get another water user. That's Carl Marshall up at the Chevy Chase Country Club. I'm not sure of their number as far as the use of the water, but I know they're not too far behind us. And at that time, a new preliminary report was going to be made on the additional cost or reduced cost of having this additional water user in the system along with ourselves in Chevy Oaks. And so far it hasn't been done. We haven't had our update report. We've been very patient. I know since that time you had Disney come in. I can understand Disney. I guess if our name was Disney Rancho, we might have recycled water right now. But we've been patient. We waited. We like to get some dialogue here to see where we are, see what needs to be done, because we definitely need it. And as I mentioned, we're the 5th largest water user, and I think we're about due. Just briefly, before I want to do my time lapse, I was here in March of last year, March 16th. I came up here because I had a rental that I wanted to get the water in my name. I came in at 12:07. I left at 1:49, and it was not a pretty sight at all. You had 2 of your colleagues or department employees look out the bay window to see what it was. You only had 1 employee there to wait on the customers. And it was very, very bad. Hopefully that can be improved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from staff on that?
We have actually presented to this commission last year, you may recall, a very comprehensive plan for expanding recycled water in Glendale. And we can reproduce, in fact, that same presentation will finally be going to City Council next week. But we did do that, so we can get a copy to Mr. Cornell also, which outlines the whole plan, the costs associated with it, and so on. We shall do that.
Did that plan also include recycled water to his community?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I recall that was on the top 3. Was that on
yes.
the top 3 of that list of capital?
I believe it was, yes.
And what about the customer service issue that Mr. Cornell mentioned?
It's hard to pinpoint one specific day. Normally that's not the case, but it is possible. It is possible, and there's no question that we've had times where we've been understaffed in the last year. It's been an issue for us. We continue to try to fill positions. The customer service area turns over, and we have a difficult time filling positions. So it is possible, although it's not the norm. But I apologize if that occurred.
Thank you.
Mr. Steiger, with regard to the Rancho area, it's my understanding, and it's been a while since I've looked at that recycled water report, but I believe the historic issue with this particular area is the distance and the cost associated with bringing recycled water to the Rancho area. It's very problematic because the costs are so exorbitant just to bring the pipes to that area. I don't recall specifically where it fell in the report that went to the commission previously, but I recall that was a concern.
Yeah, it's in the report and the costs are outlined, but that is true, yes.
Because our next speaker will be Scott Buki and Jan Swenson.
I'm sorry, if I may, one other item on that recycled water. I think it might be on the 19th. I'm not 100% positive whether it's on the next
council,
week's
you mean?
council agenda
It
or whether
is.
it's the week after. Is it the 19th?
Currently, it's on the 19th.
The 19th, got it. Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jan Swinton. I'm the Associate Dean of Instruction and Workforce Development at Glendale Community College. And this is my colleague, Scott Rubke. He's the chairperson of the Technology Division. And we are here tonight to invite you to a very exciting event. We've been in partnership with the Verdugo Workforce Investment Board under the leadership of Executive Director Don Nakamoto, and with Glendale Water and Power with Glenn and Ramon Abweg. And this partnership between the Verdugo WIB, Glendale Water and Power, and Glendale Community College, with the use of the ARA funds, the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act funds, we were able to fund training utility workers. And our first class is graduating on Friday. And I'm going to let Scott tell you a little bit about the academy.
All right, well, thank you, and good evening, Commissioners and Mr. Steiger. We are excited about this, and I have given you the program for the event. You'll notice that Congressman Schiff is attending and will be speaking and be assisting in issuance of the certificates. Also, State Senator Carol Liu will be present, and all our partners will be present there. And incidentally, the graduating class will be there without the Mylar balloons or squirrels. So we're quite proud of this effort, and we're hoping to see this continue and be sustained, if you will, even after the ARA funding has gone away. We quite proudly have a class of 18 to graduate. We started with 20. One person opted out basically after about 2 days of the program. Another person left the program at the end of the 7th week out of 16 weeks. He left because he got a job with a subcontractor with AT&T doing fiber optic work and so forth. So we don't see that as a failure, but as a success, and we're hoping that the input that he received while he was in the academy will be useful in his new job. So we're excited and would love to see all of you present if you can make it. And I really don't know what else to say within the time limits here, but please come to this event if you can. It's really about two things. One, this graduating class